the model millionaire.
Hughie Erskine was a good-looking man. Hughie Erskine was the best-looking gentleman in London. He had curly brown hair, grey eyes, and a handsome face. He also had many friends. However, Hughie Erskine did not have much money. His father had been an officer in the army. His father was dead. Now Hughie had his father's sword and a few books, but no money. Hughie Erskine had tried to do several jobs. He had worked for a tea merchant selling tea. He had worked for a wine merchant selling wine. But poor Hughie was not good at anything. Hughie was in love and wanted to get married. He loved Laura Merton, the daughter of an army officer. Laura loved Hughie, but her father did not want them to get married. "You're a fine young man," Colonel Merton said to Hughie, "but you have no money. My daughter cannot marry a man with no money. You may marry my daughter when you have £10,000. Hughie did not have £10,000. He did not have £10. His old aunt gave him £4 or £5 a week. Today, he had only £1 in his pocket. Hughie was almost broke. Hughie had a friend called Alan Trevor. Alan was an artist who painted pictures of people. He was a good artist and quite famous. Many people wanted him to paint their portrait. People came to Alan's studio. Alan painted their portraits in the studio. Alan's pictures were very expensive. He only painted pictures for rich men. Hughie Erskine visited Alan Trevor in his studio. Alan was working on a painting. "What do you think of this?" asked Alan Trevor. "And what do you think of my model?" Hughie looked at the painting. It was a picture of an old beggar. Alan was painting a picture of a man who was standing in the corner of the studio. The model was an old man dressed in old, torn clothes. The old man's face was sad. With one hand he held out a hat. In the other hand he held a stick. "My model is wonderful," said Alan. "Have you ever seen such a wonderful beggar?" "Poor old man," said Hughie. "How sad he looks." "Of course," said Alan. "I don't want a beggar to look happy." "How much is a model paid for standing in your studio?" asked Hughie. "Not much," answered Alan. "Only £1 an hour." "And how much money do you get when you sell a picture?" asked Hughie. "For this picture, I will get £2,000, said Alan. "You're a rich man. I think the model should get some of the money," said Hughie. "Nonsense, nonsense," said Alan. "It's difficult to be a painter. It's not difficult to be a beggar. Few people can paint pictures. Anyone can beg." "But many people want to be rich and famous painters," said Hughie. "No one wants to be a poor beggar. You artists are very unkind." Alan Trevor laughed. "I'm busy," he said. "Sit down and stop talking." A servant came in. "A gentleman is outside, sir. He wants you to paint his portrait. Can you speak to him, please?" "Don't go away," Alan said to Hughie. "I'll be back in a moment." Alan left the room. The old beggar sat down on a chair and rested. His hat was still in his hand. The old man looked so sad that Hughie felt sorry for him. Hughie put his hand in his pocket. He had £1. It was the last of his money. "Well, he needs the money more than I do," thought Hughie. Hughie went across the room and put the £1 in the old man's hat. The old man was very surprised. He looked at the money and smiled. "Thank you, sir," he said. "Thank you very much." Alan Trevor came back into the studio and Hughie left. He went to see Laura and told her about the beggar. "You gave all your money away," said Laura. "That was very foolish. My father will never let me marry a foolish man. You are very foolish, but you are very kind, and I love you very much." That night, Hughie met Alan Trevor at a club. Alan was looking very pleased. "I finished that picture," said Alan, "and my model was very interested in you. He asked me lots of questions." "Poor old man," said Hughie. "I wish I could help him. What did he ask you about me?" "He wanted to know everything about you," said Alan. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him everything," said Alan. "I told him all about you. I told him about Laura. I told him about Laura's father. I told him you want to marry Laura but have no money." "Alan," said Hughie angrily, "you told him all about my private business?"
"Don't be angry," said Alan. "You don't know who I was painting the picture for. I was painting it for the Baron von Habsburg. He is one of the richest men in Europe. Baron von Habsburg was my model. The Baron dressed up as an old beggar." "The Baron von Habsburg," cried Hughie. "You mean that old beggar was the Baron himself?" "Yes," said Alan. "But I gave him £1, said Hughie. Now I feel foolish." "You gave him £1," said Alan. "That's the funniest thing I've ever heard." Alan Trevor could not stop laughing. Huey Erskine walked home. He felt foolish. He had given his last pound to a millionaire. Laura's father would hear about this. The colonel would never let his daughter marry a fool. The next day, Huey Erskine had a visitor. Huey did not know the man. "How can I help you?" asked Huey. "I have come from the Baron von Hosberg," said the visitor. "The Baron von Hosberg," said Huey Erskine. "I did not know him when we met yesterday. I want to tell the Baron that I am sorry. I think I was rude to him." The visitor smiled. "You were not rude to the Baron," he said. "The Baron asked me to give you this." He gave Huey an envelope. These words were written on the envelope: "A wedding present to Hugh Erskine and Laura Merton from an old beggar." Inside was a check for £10,000.
The Law of Life.
The old Indian was sitting on the snow. It was Kaskush, former chief of his tribe. Now all he could do was sit and listen to the others. His eyes were old and he could not see, but his ears were wide open to every sound. Aha! That was the sound of his daughter, Sitkamtoha. She was beating the dogs, trying to make them stand in front of the snow sleds. He was forgotten by her, and by the others too. They had to look for new hunting grounds. The long, snowy ride waited, and the days of the Northlands were growing short. The tribe could not wait for death, and Kaskush was dying. The stiff, crackling noises of frozen animal skins told him that the chief's tent was being torn down. The chief was a mighty hunter. He was his son, the son of Kaskush. And Kaskush was being left to die. As the women worked, old Kaskush could hear his son's voice drive them to work faster. He listened harder. It was the last time he would hear that voice. A child cried, and a woman sang softly to quiet it. The child was Koti, the old man thought, a sickly child. It would die soon, and they would burn a hole in the frozen ground to bury it. They would cover its small body with stones to keep the wolves away. Well, what of it? A few years, and in the end, death. Death waited, ever hungry. Death had the hungriest stomach of all. Kaskush listened to other sounds he would hear no more. The men tying strong leather rope around the sleds to hold their belongings. The sharp sounds of leather whips ordering the dogs to move and pull the sleds. Listen to the dogs cry. How they hated the work. They were off. Sled after sled moved slowly away into the silence. They had passed out of his life, and he must meet his last hour alone. But what was that? The snow packed down hard under someone's shoes. A man stood beside him and placed a hand gently on his old head. His son was good to do this. He remembered other old men whose sons had not done this, but left without a goodbye. His mind traveled into the past until his son's voice brought him back. "It is well with you?" his son asked. And the old man answered, "It is well."
"There is wood next to you, and the fire burns bright," the son said. "The morning is gray, and the cold has hid. It will snow soon. Even now it is snowing. Even now it is snowing." The tribesmen hurry. Their loads are heavy, and their stomachs flat from little food. The way is long, and they travel fast. I go now. All is well? It is well. I'm as last year's leaf that sticks to the tree. The first breath that blows will knock me to the ground. My voice is like an old woman's. My eyes no longer show me the way my feet go. I'm tired, and all is well.
He lowered his head to his chest and listened to the snow as his son rode away. He felt the sticks of wood next to him again. One by one, the fire would eat them. And step by step, death would cover him. When the last stick was gone, the cold would come. First, his feet would freeze, then his hands. The cold would travel slowly from the outside to the inside of him, and he would rest. It was easy. All men must die. He felt sorrow, but he did not think of his sorrow. It was the way of life. He had lived close to the earth, and the law was not new to him. It was the law of the flesh. Nature was not kind to the flesh. She was not thoughtful of the person alone. She was interested only in the group, the race, the species. This was a deep thought for old Kaskush. He had seen examples of it in all his life. The tree sap in early spring. The newborn green leaf, soft and fresh as skin. The fall of the yellow dry leaf. In this alone was all history. He placed another stick on the fire and began to remember his past. He had been a great chief too. He had seen days of much food and laughter, fat stomachs when food was left to rot and spoil, times when they left animals alone unkilled, and days when women had many children. And he had seen days of no food and flat stomachs, days when the fish did not come and the animals were hard to find. For 7 years the animals did not come. And then he remembered when a small boy how he watched the wolves kill a moose. He was with his friend Zhang-ha, who was killed later in the Yukon River. Ah, but the moose. Zhang-ha and he had gone out to play that day. Down by the river they saw fresh steps of a big, heavy moose. "He's an old one," Zhang-ha had said. "He cannot run like the others and has fallen behind. The wolves have separated him from the others and they will never leave him." And so it was. By day and night, never stopping, biting at his nose, biting at his feet, the wolves stayed with him until the end. Zhang-ha and he had felt the blood quicken in their bodies. The end would be a sight to see. They had followed the steps of the moose and the wolves. Each step told a different story. They could see the tragedy as it happened. Here was the place the moose stopped to fight. The snow was packed down for many feet. One wolf had been caught by the heavy feet of the moose and kicked to death. Further on, they saw how the moose had struggled to escape up a hill, but the wolves had attacked from behind. The moose had fallen down and crushed 2 wolves. But it was clear the end was near. The snow was red ahead of them. Then they heard the sounds of the battle. Not the clear, long wolf sounds all barking together, but the short teeth-sounding noises as they bit the flesh. He and Zhang-ha moved closer on their stomachs so the wolves would not see them. They saw the end. And the picture was so strong. It had stayed with him all his life. His dull, blind eyes saw the end again as they had in the far-off past. For long his mind saw his past. The fire began to die out, and the cold entered his body. He placed 2 more sticks on it. Just 2 more left. This would be how long he would live. It was very lonely.
He placed one of the last pieces of wood on the fire. "Listen," What a strange noise for wood to make in the fire. No, it wasn't wood. And his body shook as he recognized the sound. Wolves. The cry of a wolf brought the picture of the old moose back to him again. He saw the body torn to pieces with fresh blood running on the snow. He saw the clean bones lying gray against the frozen blood. He saw the rushing forms of the gray wolves, their shining eyes, their long wet tongues and sharp teeth. And he saw them form a circle and move ever slowly closer and closer. A cold wet nose touched his face. At the touch his soul jumped forward to awaken him. His hand went to the fire and he pulled a burning stick from it. The wolf saw the fire, but was not afraid. He turned and shouted into the air to his brother wolves. They answered with hunger in their throats and came running. The old Indian listened to the hungry wolves. He heard them form a circle around him and his small fire. He waved his burning stick at them, but they did not move away. Now one of them moved closer. Slowly, as if to test the old man's strength. Another and another followed. The circle grew smaller and smaller, and not one wolf stayed behind. Why should he fight? Why cling to life? And he dropped his stick with the fire on the end of it. It fell in the snow and the light went out. The circle of wolves moved closer. And once again the old Indian saw the picture of the moose as it struggled before the end came. He dropped his head to his knees. What did it matter after all? Isn't this the law of life?